and saying, no. I'm saying you prove that.
Because he was a guide, a hadi. We say that he is the best of guides for the whole of humanity. Now, if my master, for example, says that I should follow him in his commands, if the emperor says I must follow this governor in his commands, does that mean I've made the governor emperor? No. It's quite clear that the command comes from God unto follow the Prophet Muhammad. Very clear, it's the basic, we don't need too much language. The second one in regards to the hadith, now he tried to cast aspersions on the hadith. It's not going to work. Bilal radiallahu anhu, he called the adhan. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah. From the time of Zaman, from the beginning to now, in prayer the Muslims said what? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. So he said this is a bid'ah. We have evidence now. If he rejects hadith, he has to reject the majority of history as well. Because hadith is some of the most vigorous information or history that we actually have. We have a supporting chain of narration. We have something called the Hammul Ilm. I would not be able to pass down history unless my teacher, who was an eyewitness, and we know his character, we know his memory retention, his ability to recall information and give it, and his honesty and so on and so forth, witness the event and he passed it down to his student, So if you reject hadith, you reject history. You have to have consistency. There's no point in going on ad infinitum. I'll let you have the last word. But I think it's quite, I see it's quite clear for everyone. This discussion is just folly. Anyway, barakallah feek. Kalam, here.
Would you like to stay?
No, I'll stay. I'll watch from the sidelines. I'm giving you the last word. Unless you want me the last word as well.
Oh, fantastic.
Stop acting as well.
Fantastic. Right, so the good brother over here is talking about, history and hadiths and so forth, right? As to say that the hadiths don't actually contradict themselves. As to say that there's hadiths that aren't graded as weak, aren't graded as strong, aren't graded as, I don't even know, what's the word, fabricated and so forth. There's loads of different hadiths that we can clearly see there is contradictions in there. Anyways, again, he was talking about, where is he? Oh, I would stay, but He also talked about following the messenger as well as following the Quran and so forth, right? But there is contradictions going on. For example, I'm going to give you something just simple, something real simple. I'm not going to say it's the end all or be all. But for example, in the Quran, how many wives can you have at maximum? Anybody? How many wives can you have at maximum? Four wives at one time, right?
Yeah,
4 wives at one time.
That's what the Quran says.
But then when you go into hadith culture, how many wives did the Prophet actually have?
He had 13 if I'm correct.
13. 13. Let's just say 13, for example. So clearly there is a contradiction going on. Which one should we follow? Should we follow marrying 13 wives, or should we follow marrying 4 wives as the Quran states, right? And if we choose marrying 13 wives as the Prophet did, according to the Hadith culture, we're choosing the Prophet over the Quran or Allah's words. If the Quran says you shouldn't marry young girls or you should marry women, but then Muhammad had sexual relationships and married, sorry, let me repeat that again. He married a young girl at the age of 9, according to some Hadith culture, right? But then the Quran says you should only marry women. Which one should we follow?
The Quran also allows you to marry women that haven't had their period. It's actually in the verse.
We'll talk about it another time, right? That's another conversation, right? So which one do we follow? In Yemen right now, they're marrying 9-year-old girls, right? Which one do they follow? Are they following the Quran or they're following Muhammad and his hadiths? Clearly, we can see that there is issues right there. Clearly, we can see if you bind partnership, right, with Allah and Muhammad, you're going to have to choose one or the other in certain times of contradictions, right? And that's my whole point. If you're choosing Muhammad's words over Allah's words, you're choosing to worship Muhammad or the supposed words of Muhammad over Allah. Is that plain and simple? Some people, it's going to be too difficult to comprehend that. Others, you lot should be able to grasp that. It's not that difficult.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
You said that if you're choosing Muhammad's words, I'd like you to continue.
Okay.
But how many times does the Quran actually tell you to pray?
The Quran doesn't actually give you amount of times to pray. To
does
tell you
say
numerically.
3 times.
No, it doesn't tell you.
It doesn't tell you.
Numerically how many times to pray. It tells you pray during the morning, prayer in the morning, or glorify God in the morning, in the middle, and at night.
So that's 3 times, yes.
Yeah.
Which I wanted you to confirm.
Yeah.
Because you said it doesn't give you, but it tells you the times to pray,
Yeah.
which comes up to 3.
Yeah.
How many times do you pray as a Muslim?
I'm not a Muslim.
Okay, you're not a Muslim.
No.
All right. Muslims do pray 5 times, so they get that from the Hadith culture.
Yeah.
I tried to get into this conversation to ask about the Shahada because I heard there was a debate of the Shahada.
Yeah.
Did you mention that Shahada issue out? Were you the one? Can you please give me a description of where the Shahada come from?
So the Shahada is actually mentioned within inside of the Quran, right?
Okay.
So to bear witness that, he's the only one worthy of worship, or to bear witness that he's the Lord, and so forth, and so forth.
Is that really the Shahada? Do you know the Shahada?
Well, the Shahada in terms of La ilaha illallah or Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah.
Do you know the origins of the Shahada?
Yes. What do you mean by the origin?
Where was the first religion to actually use that Shahada?
The first religion, according to what verse?
According to Islam, because they said there were many prophets before Muhammad. They say, I mean, this is Islam's claim.
So according to the Islamic narrative,
Yes.
one would propose that it would be the Hanafiya would be the first people.
The Hanafiya.
Hanafiya would
And
be
who
the
were the
first people.
Hanafiya? What was their worship? Were they Muslims?
No, they were not Muslims in the sense of the religion of Islam. One would say, in terms of semantically, they were the ones who submitted themselves to God, or all that stuff.
Okay, the Hanifa.
Yeah,
Well,
Hanafi.
I can tell you where the actual origin.
But the actual, for example, you can find the certain verbiage within inside of the Jewish scripture, the Torah itself.
That's the Shema you're talking about. There's only one God.
Yeah. There is other things,
or
and the
Israel.
negation
There is
of
one God.
and the negation of other gods as well.
But in the regards to the Shahada, it actually has an origin in another religion. Are you aware of this?
Yes, it's inside of.
Are you filming?
Yeah, it's inside of.
Whoa, that's a very lovely red, lovely red.
So inside of what you consider to be, from an Islamic point of view, from an Islamic narrative,
Islamic
you got the
narrative.
Hanafiya, right?
Hanafiya.
But they go by several different names. So you have the Sabians.
Oh,
Sabians.
thank you. So now you've got to so let me give you the historic narrative on the Shahada so that I can enlighten you to the true knowledge of where the Shahada came from. Do you know anything about the Sabian culture?
Yep.
What do you know about the Sabians?
So most of what we know about the Sabians is coming from Islamic narrative. But there is other narratives that predate the Islamic one. You have Christian narratives, you have the Greek culture as well that speak about the Sabians as well.
Speak about the Sabians. And if you know, there's a surah that says that the people that will go to heaven are the people of the book, the Sabians, and this was abrogated later on by Muhammad. So I'm going to give you 2 references for you to because you sound like an intelligent person, and rarely hear that we talk to people that they have intelligence and they do their research. So I say that as a thumbs up to your integrity, but I like to give you some other scholarly issues. If you look at the Encyclopedia of Islam, page number 6, you'll find out some relationships about who the god of the Meccans was previous to Muhammad having this prophecy for Islam. But according to the Middle East scholar E.M. Weary, whose translation of the Quran is still used today, in pre-Islamic times, Allah worship, as well as the worship of Baal, were both astral religions, that they involved the worship of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, this is a citation from a book called A Comprehensive Commentary on the Quran, Osnabrück, Otto Zeller Verlag, 1973, in page 36. Now, you mentioned the Sabians. Are you aware of the worship of the Sabians?
They were it's another astral religion. It's
Astral
and
religion. Yes, and they worship 5 times a day, in the morning and that, where Islam got its initial prayers from. That's why the Sabians were agreed to go to heaven in the original, before the verses were abrogated. Now, strangely, what a lot of people are not aware of is that the Shahada is actually from the Sabian tradition.
100%.
And I'm going to give you 100%. Thank you. You're the first person that recognizes. A lot of the Muslims here screaming the Shahada, not the Muhammad part. That was actually incorporated by Islam, which we have to give that definition to. But the original Shahada come from the Sabians. So I'll give you a few historical figures that have given this record, so that you will have a more pronouncement in your knowledge long term. And this is on the Sabians, and this is by an Islamic, well, I want to call it an Arab scholar called Abid al-Rahman. Apologize for my translations, I'm not an Arab. Ibn Zayd in 79 CE AD wrote, the Sabians say their religion is a religion unto itself. They live near Mosul, Jasirat al-Mosul, which is Mosul, city of Mosul, and believe in only one God. He wrote that they have no cult of their own. Their main belief is La ilaha illallah. He also remarked that the Sabian did not believe in the Prophet Muhammad the same way as followers did. Yet the polytheists were known to say the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, they were Sabians, comparing them to them. Following Din and Noah, a sect who read the Zabar. So the Sabians read the Zabar, like the Psalms, which you would be aware. And it also goes, there's a lot of other scholars that did mention this. I'm aware. So the Sabian religion is, in modern times, it's called the Mandeans. And there's a documentary by the BBC on them. They also believe in baptism, and they believe in John the Baptist, which is kind of strange. So the Sabian religion is actually where the Shahada comes from. And this is a historical fact. So since you're not a Muslim, it would be very hard to sell this idea to you. But I think a lot of Muslims are actually ignorant to the fact that their Shahada is a Sabian, which is a pagan religion of moon worship. And if you know Hubal and Yasin, Yasin is also a chapter in the Quran. Yasin is another name for Hubal, which is another name for Baal. And some Christian channels, like Christian Prince, explain that La is the moon god, which is the god Thoth in the Emerald Book of Thoth, which is the book of the Egyptologists.
It's wrong.
Well, they'll say this, but if you look at the hieroglyphics and the archaeology,
I read hieroglyphics.
There's a lot. I do as well. Strangely, I read the Emerald Book of Thoth in hieroglyphics. I spent a few years, so I'm one of those that are very well scholared in the occult and everything.
So I'm going to quickly say, I read it. I read hieroglyphics, and I saw what Christian Prince did, and it was commendable. And I'm like, well done. But unfortunately, he did make a little mistake.
Okay.
On
the probably on the translation of what Al. Wasn't Al the meaning of God, like Baal? It's a hyphen. So Al means something. It doesn't mean the.
It's a generic term
for God in the
Semitic
language. So La must be the name of the God that they worship, because the Sabians had this God, and from Christianity perspective, which I am a Christian and I'm an evangelist, I do not associate myself with a name of a God that is not Yahweh. But what we need, what you can confirm is that the Sabian Shahada is what the Muslims incorporated, and they use Muhammad Rasulullah, I've forgotten the Arabic translation, and I won't say it because they will start saying I've converted to Islam here in Speaker's Corner. But Sabians were the ones that brought the Shahada to the Islamic concept.
100%. Muhammad, well, according to the Hadith culture, clearly Muhammad adopted the Shahada from them.
Do you know what else that Islam took for the Sabians?
One could say it took the prayer system from them.
Yes, 5 prayers, that's correct.
One could say
Ramadan.
There is fasting as well.
Yes, Ramadan.
There is the charity as well. Zakat. There is a whole list of things. Pilgrimage as well. Basically, I think the 5 pillars of Islam is literally coming from the Sabian religion.
Precisely, and you mentioned the Hanifa, and the Hanifa were a sect of the Sabians, which you should be aware of historically. And the Hanifa were, for example,
were the ones who were responsible for educating Muhammad.
Precisely, and you would know, sorry, what's the Muhammad scholar, the guy that... Waraka. He was one of the chief priests of the Sabian sect. He was not a people of the book. He wasn't a Christian, as some Muslims are led to believe, but he was actually a Sabian high priest, and they believed in cave worship, which the Sabians also did, where they received revelations by doing so. In fact, Islam, as the Muslims claim, is an old religion. Muhammad is the one that's refined that religion, but Islam has existed from the time of the Sabians. Do you know any biblical context to the Sabians, just out of interest?
Biblical context to the Sabians?
Just his face.
Possibly, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll give you. You know the oldest book in the Bible? Just a quick question. Do you know which one it is?
The oldest book inside of the canon of the Bible.
The canon of the Bible.
Some people argue, could say Job.
Yes, you're right. It's actually Job is the author of the book of Job. Is actually the prophet Moses. So he was told these narrations before, and he incorporated it, which we call the Torah and separate Job. Job's family was attacked by the Sabians, and they were the ones that killed his family, and they were the people in the desert. Another record of the Sabian with the crescent moon symbol was in the book of Judges, when I've forgotten his name, which prophet it was. he slew them and he took their ornaments of crescent ornaments. So what we do know is that we have historical evidence that the god Hubal has the crescent moon, and it was one of the chief stones inside. When we look at the tafsirs on Quranic tafsir, I can't remember the ones offhand. So we can establish that the Muslims need to reflect on their religion in a holistic way. Look at things like the Encyclopedia of Islam.
Look at the pagan roots of
A
Islam.
pagan.
Yeah.
So you being someone that doesn't believe in Islam, and are you a Christian just to...
No.
Okay, so you're not a Christian, so this is a quite decent conversation between two people that are truth seekers, and you can confirm that, yes, Islam does take Sabian tradition, and it's very different to what they think it is.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
What's your name, by the way?
Callum.
My name's Yakub.
Nice to meet you.
Christian.
Yes, why are you not a Christian?
Oh man!
Why are you not a Christian? Someone like you that's it.
Why am I not a Christian? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. You know what? The reason why I'm not a Christian is because Jesus was not a Christian. That's a simple answer.
The question is, who were the Sabians? Did you cover who the Sabians were?
Yeah, the Sabians are the oldest religion. They're the moon worshippers. They're astral.
But
They're in the Middle East.
I am a follower of the Logos, though. I am.
Zoroastrianism is from Persia.
Okay, he follows the logos.
I follow the Logos. Though.
We follow the logos. Callum, that was a really beautiful conversation. Thank you very much. Bless.
Thank you, Kalam. Thank you, bro.
So I'd like to thank Callum for giving me a time to address him, and he has confirmed that Islam is built on the Sabian traditions. The 5 pillars of Islam cover Sabianism. The Sabians were the ones that killed the Prophet Job. So this is concrete evidence, like he said with his own mouth. They take 5 pagan traditions from the Sabians: the prayer, the zakat, Ramadan, the Shahada. These are not practices of the one God. We as Christians, we worship the one true God, which is mentioned in Genesis, the Spirit of God, the Son of God, and the Father. These are the 3 that are one in form. We call on Muslims to start looking at the Encyclopedia of Islam and other literature. If you do not believe the Bible, at least research your own religion so you have a better understanding. When you're screaming your Shahada here to heckle us when we're preaching the gospel, you're actually screaming pagan chants. And this is evidence known to anybody that has any historical knowledge. Once more, if you want to be saved and sure that you have eternal salvation, you have to come to our Lord Jesus Christ. It is through that profession of your faith in Christ and belief that the Son of God died on the cross in atonement for your sin that will bring you to salvation. Your zakat, your shahada, and other things will not save you from the eternal damnation. So please research, because eternity in hellfire is not where you want to be going. And when you have been shown concrete evidence that your religion is built on pagan foundations, you need to take this very seriously.